This 7 arguments against heaven video popped up in my feed, and I like to reason through people's arguments against the faith, so I clicked it. This guy, he's an ex-Christian, and he's talking more about the Christian heaven, so I'll be responding as a Christian. And I think this video has some flawed ideas and some flawed logic, but there were a couple points that made me think a bit deeper about my faith. Let's get into it.
Set of problems. But I want to major in the majors. I think when most Christians, and I am talking about the Christian heaven here, the biblical heaven, think about heaven, they think about a few things, and I want to throw them out there. Will there be some of you in the comments who are like, well, technically that's not what I think? Fine. I'm majoring in the majors. Most people believe that heaven is eternal. It goes on forever and it does not end. Most people think that they will be in heaven in some physical sense, that we will be able to recognize other people, that there will be food, that there will be places, that there are streets made of gold, that these are physical, tangible realities. We are not just floating in a cloud in perfect bliss. We are actually doing things, mainly worshiping God. But there are feasts where we will eat. Supposedly we will have mansions, we will have our crowns, all of these other very materialist things. Like, how unimportant would gold be in heaven, right? What would give it its value? It wouldn't be rare. Everything is made of gold there. Are we supposed to remember from our earthly experience on this one particular planet, even though there's probably life on other planets, that gold was a limited resource here for a period of time that made it valuable? Like, how man-made is this concept? But again, I'm giving this to all of you. Let's just assume that the descriptions of heaven are accurate as they are described in the Bible. Let's assume that it goes on forever. Let's assume that there is some sense of us that is still us that is there.
So I wanted to address this first point about receiving gifts in heaven is materialistic, or that gold doesn't have value in heaven. The thing that I wanted to say about things being materialistic is, aren't we supposed to enjoy God's gift? Isn't that the whole, we're supposed to share in creation with God, and it's not bad to have things. It's bad to love things, objects, more than you love the creator who created the objects. But the objects themselves give glory back to the creator who made the great objects, right? So it's not bad to have things. It's bad to love them more than you love the creator who made the things that you have, that blessed you with these objects. And the same way that God blesses us on earth, he promises to bless us in heaven, so there will be rewards in heaven. But if the question were to be rephrased as, why are there rewards in heaven at all? It's part of God's justice. There's this concept of reaping and sowing, and that the work that we do will not be in vain, and that it will be rewarded, that if you sow good seeds, that it will grow into good fruit or good plants. And so just this whole idea of we reaped on earth and then there will be rewards in heaven because we showed God's glory on earth. We followed his will while we were here. And God just desires to bless us, but also part of his justice is that good works will be rewarded. I think if we're going to talk about gold does have value outside of its rarity. It's pleasing to look at. It would be used for its beauty. And I don't want to completely speculate on why it would be used in heaven, but there's one practical reason. Making a note that there's life on other planets doesn't refute Christianity in any way. Our God is a creator God, and we know that he's already created other living beings besides what we see on earth, the angels. And I don't think it was being used like that, but I wanted to clarify that part of it. And then about its value coming from earth or coming from the way that it's valued on a different planet. Like I said, it's valued for its beauty, and we could see that there's a lot of things in creation that are valued for its beauty, regardless of its monetary value or its rarity.
Let's start off simple and with a really easy one. How about just eternal monotony? I'm talking boredom. I'm talking the very first thought most of us had as kids when we heard about heaven. Now, some of our parents told us, oh, it's great. You'll be riding flying horses and eating whatever food you like the best and all of these things. But that's not the reality. Many of us were told about the worship part, that we would endlessly, eternally be worshiping God. Now, maybe some of that are correlating worship incorrectly. And we thought of the praise and worship parts of service at church. And we thought, oh, I don't want to do that forever. Maybe worshiping God is just living perfectly. Maybe that brings glory to him. But the actual descriptions we get of worship are closer to the first one. They are about songs that are sang, instruments that are played, our bodily position of being bent over and bowed down, etc. That does not sound fun. But Brandon, you don't understand. We'll be filled with the light. We'll be filled with God's presence. We'll be right there. We'll be compelled to do nothing else. There will be no greater thing you could do for eternity than praise God. I'm going to skip the narcissistic parts of how ridiculous it is that this God who wants a relationship with us is having an end goal where the vast amount of all time, like if eternity is real, if infinity is a concept and you live 120 years, take it to the max here, it doesn't matter. It's like nothing. It's literally more comparable to zero than any other number. That means that God's intention, his design for all time is just to have his robotic slaves worshiping him. Why would he need this? Why would he want this? I'm serious. Like if you really zoom out, it makes no sense. And it sounds absolutely awful.
I don't think this idea of eternal monotony stands up, especially when you think about the concept of worship that was talked about here. Worship is more than just singing and praying, and it's not things that you do. Worship is checking your heart on what you're doing. He said it a little bit earlier. Maybe worship is just living in God's ways or something to that effect. That's what it is. Originally, before sin, we were meant to live on the earth and populate the earth and subdue the earth. And there wasn't this idea that we were going to have a heavenly body and go through this whole process. We were always meant to be on the earth. So therefore, living in God's ways was always honoring to him and giving glory to him and worshiping him. And yes, there are formal times when we sing and we do these things, but we're also just supposed to live life. The first task of Adam and Eve was to tend to the garden. So all this to say, worship is everything that we do to the glory of God. It's not specific actions, but the heart behind actions. You know, you can give money to the glory of God, or you can give money for the glory of yourself because you want everybody to see you as a loving person. So there's a difference between the heart behind an action.
More on the monotony front, I really believe that something that never ends, right? That we're going to run into a series of repeatable events forever. I really think a lot of people who haven't thought about deep time or haven't read mathematical books on the concept of infinity and things like this, which is a huge interest of mine, I absolutely fascinates me. They have a hard time conceptualizing, and I do too. I'm not like, oh, I read a few books, now I get it. Like, it's an impossible thing to conceptualize. But there are some visualizations and some kind of thought experiments that one can do to help get them further down the road. And the further down the road you go towards the concept of infinity, the more you realize there's no good version of it. There can't be. Nothing can go on forever and be a good thing. You'll live every possible occurrence of anything that can be done in heaven, a billion, trillion, quadrillion, Google times a billion times over forever, and it will be just the beginning, just the blink of an eye of how many more times you'll do it again. But that's just a little teaser to get us started. I've already realized that I've mixed kind of points 1 and 2 here, which is monotony and slavery. So let's just kind of combine this, point 1 and 2.
So going into his second argument about how an infinite time in heaven, no matter what you could do, has to end up being boring because you'll end up doing everything you can possibly do in heaven, and you'll just hit this wall where you've done everything a million times, and then you'll end up being bored eventually. I think that the idea that an infinite time in heaven with God would be awful is just ridiculous, because it forgets the idea that God is the creator God and that he can keep on creating and that he will continue to create, and then we'll continue to share in the creation in whatever jobs that we do have in heaven. Another part of it is that we are restored and we don't have the same needs that we did when we were on earth. We're not going to be lacking in food, and we're not going to be lacking companionship. There's so many things that we do because we're lacking something, but we won't lack in heaven. We won't have a bunch of things to be complaining about. And like I said, I don't want to just completely speculate about things that weren't talked about. But I think that the relationship part of heaven is going to be a big factor in a lot of the desires that we have. You know, on earth, we play basketball because we want to beat other people, or, you know, there's some type of improvement type of thing. But maybe in heaven, we do things with others because we genuinely enjoy doing things with others. And that is our main pursuit, rather than, oh, I need to do this hobby because it gives me enjoyment, and I want to do this because I like to the competition of things. Maybe it's more of, hey, I enjoy people, and that's kind of what's driving us. And there's going to be all these people that we just love and we get to be brothers and sisters with and have all of these deep, close relationships with. And I think that is going to be a big part of heaven and a big difference from how earth is now.
Can be done in heaven, a billion, trillion, quadrillion, Google times a billion times over forever, and it will be just the beginning, just the blink of an eye of how many more times you'll do it again. But that's just a little teaser to get us started. I've already realized that I've mixed kind of points 1 and 2 here, which is monotony and slavery. So let's just kind of combine this, point 1 and 2, and I'll continue to talk about it. Now, a lot of the excuses for this are, again, going back to, but you don't understand, we've never been in the very presence of God. We could spend an eternity worshiping him, and it would be amazing. Well, this then leads to that second point that we've already mixed in a little bit, which is slavery. Heaven sounds like eternal submission, right? Can I choose to leave? That would be question number 1. Can I opt out? Can I choose oblivion at some point? Maybe after 2 billion years, I'm just really done with this concept. Can I leave? No, I can't leave. Well, Brandon, it's not so much that you can't leave, it's that God wouldn't have you have the desire to leave. So God's controlling me. God's controlling my mind. God's controlling my will and my desires. He's forcing it. He's compelling it by his very presence. That's slavery. I don't care what positive spin you want to put on it because you've called God a good thing. I'll even, for all of this that we're talking about today, I'm going to entertain the idea that this God is actually somehow good, just, and moral, which is already so problematic, right? But I'm trying to really just think like, okay, you guys are all right. This God is real. Hell doesn't exist. There's oblivion and annihilation and universalism and all of these things. How is heaven going? And the very fact that I have no say in the matter, I have no say that that's the only alternative, right? Like with universalism, or that it's sure, maybe it is better than hell. I'll give you that. But the lesser of two evils doesn't make it beneficial or good. And God forcing it to be good, right? Like if I can't even choose to think how I want to feel about it, to have my own experience, if every single person who's ever lived, think about how different we all are. If we're all going to have exactly perfect, repeatable, and expected outcomes in heaven to experience everything in the exact same way, what's the point? How on earth could we all agree on that without some coercion, some forced manipulation of our will and thought processes and feelings? Oh, we don't have.
So this slavery idea is really an argument against free will and us having free will in heaven. And I think that it's already clear with the angels rebelling that we will have free will in heaven. And it will be a different situation because we are restored humans. So we had already had our sinful lifestyle. And then we turned away from that sin. Once we got saved and the Holy Spirit entered us, we have been doing God's work in trying to get more people to heaven. And we've already recognized that and submitted to God, and we want to be with him. And so it's not that God is forcing us to be there. not only have we already chosen to be there, but we won't lack things. We won't be complaining in all of these things. We won't say, "Ah, man, heaven doesn't have this. I just want to go back to earth," or whatever it is. We're not going to lack in whatever area you can think. We're not going to lack. And this also goes into another thing of like, do we have our previous memories or whatever? And like, this is from my own thinking. I would think that we do have our memories, and though we don't have sadness. Why? Because we understand God's full plan and how our previous life was used and where it ended up, and we can be joyful about how our life went and how it was all part of God's plan and how God's glory was shown in the end. So I think we'll be joyful about our lives, but we will know the true wages of sin and what death truly means and what it means to be separated from God for eternity. And so that is what hell is. He talked a little bit about hell. Oh, maybe heaven's better than hell. Well, all the good things that we have in this world are because of God. So it'll be a place where good things don't happen. So whether it's people burning or not, it's a place where good things do not happen. And heaven is a place where good things continually happen for eternity. And that's the point. It's not, hey, you're going to burn, we don't like you, or whatever it is. You've chosen to be separate from God, and God is everything good. So there's a place where people go that has no good.
I have no say that that's the only alternative, right? Like with universalism, or that it's sure, maybe it is better than hell. I'll give you that. But the lesser of two evils doesn't make it beneficial or good. And God forcing it to be good, right? Like if I can't even choose to think how I want to feel about it, to have my own experience, if every single person who's ever lived, think about how different we all are. If we're all going to have exactly perfect, repeatable, and expected outcomes in heaven.
One of the arguments talked about was that we're all going to be doing the same thing in heaven. We're all going to think the same. We're all going to feel the same, and we're all going to receive the same things. And I don't think that this holds up, because we already know that people are going to have different rewards in heaven. And, you know, a reward is a reward. We're all going to be grateful, but we're obviously not all going to. Some people are going to be the head of cities. Some people are going to be the head of whatever. Some people are going to receive this and that. And there's different jobs in place in heaven. And we can see that with the angels. They have different jobs, and there is structure to how heaven works. And so I don't think we're all going to be doing the same thing at the same time. And even if you wanted to go back to like us praising and worshiping, there's going to be some people who are going to be playing instruments, and some people who are singing, and some people who are whatever. There's going to be a infinite number of things to do in heaven. And I don't think we're all going to experience it exactly the same. And again, if we go back to the angels, they had free will. Some of them chose to leave heaven. And although I don't think that the Christians that go to heaven will choose to leave heaven, obviously there is that option within free will. The difference is that we have the whole experience of, we had a sinful life and we turned away from it, and we know the evil of sin and we don't want to do sin. And right now on earth, we don't have the capacity to completely not sin. But in heaven, where we won't lack anything and we'll have restored bodies and things like that, we will be able to continually choose to not sin. Not that you don't have the option, but you continually choose to not sin.
To experience everything in the exact same way, what's the point? How on earth could we all agree on that without some coercion, some forced manipulation of our will and thought processes and feelings? Oh, we don't have will, thought processes, and feelings, so we are robots. We do have will, thought processes, and feelings. How? Show me how. How can I utilize them in heaven? If I can't think of alternate perspectives, if I can't come up with a better outcome, if there's just nothing different, if it can't end, like, do you guys understand really what this would seem like? And so many of you have justified the version of heaven as being so good because it's so much better than the alternative. But I'd encourage you to really think about, if hell didn't exist at all and someone just told you at the end of your life, here's what happens. You go, you get a new body, you don't feel pain anymore, you don't feel sorrow anymore. You're perfect. You're a perfect being. You can't grow. You can't get better at things. You can't develop a new skill or hobby. You can't improve. And your entire existence is simply to shout over and over, holy, holy is the name. Is that something you would willingly sign up for? And don't just say yes because you're still afraid of death or you're still afraid of hell and you're not sure what happens in the afterlife, so at least this one doesn't have any pain in it, right? Like, are you just choosing it because it is, again, the lesser of two evils? Or does this make any sense at all? And if you really, no consequences, had the option to just stop existing after a certain amount of time, wouldn't that be preferable? Wouldn't you like to at least reserve that as an option? I think if anyone is honest, then they would. And if you're so caught up in your feelings and your emotions and the glory and presence of God that you can't have those faculties, then you are no longer you anyways. You are.
So I know this video is about heaven and that he's making arguments against heaven, but there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth. So not even everybody will be in heaven. The Israelites will inherit the earth and God's kingdom will be on the earth, and there will still be a purpose on the earth. So this idea that we won't have jobs, there's nothing else to do, like, we already know there's a place besides heaven that's not corrupted, is going to be the new earth. There's a place besides heaven that isn't hell that will exist. And again, it goes along with this concept that God will just stop creating one day or whatever it may be. Something else that he talked about was, like, do we have emotions and all of these things? And basically, hey, are we going to be the same? And I think that our hearts will be changed. So at some level, we will be different. But yes, we will be the same. The whole point of going through this whole process of becoming sinless and having a new body and all these things, God never wanted to make robots. God could have done that from the beginning, but he chose to give us free will, not so that he could take it away later, but so that we could love. And that's the big thing, is that there needs to be free will in order for there to be love. And that's the big thing that people do not understand. Without free will, you're just performing actions that you're programmed to do. You can't willingly do things without free will. And at that point, it wouldn't even be slavery, because there would be no other option. You'd just be a robot, right? So no, the whole thought of slavery is that there are people who have free will and that they should be allowed to do something else. They shouldn't have to be ordered around or whatever it may be. But we don't say that robots are under slavery. They perform their job. So this whole concept is flawed. It's not slavery. If we have our free will, and God's not going to take that from us because he wants a relationship with us, because he wants us to be able to love him because he loves us, then obviously we're all going to be different. We're all going to have our whatever, like, individuality we had, the some traits from when we were on earth. Otherwise, we'd all be the same. He could have just made a bunch of clones, I guess, or we'd all be robots. And we're not. We're all different, made uniquely in the image of God, and we're all made for, we have different things that we're good at on earth, and I'm sure that there'll be different things that we're good at in heaven, and I don't completely understand how that all works out, of course. Not everything about heaven is said in the Bible, but I do think that the same way that free will is required for love on earth, it is universal. Free will be required for love in heaven as well. So as soon as free will is taken away, then we'll just be robots. Thank you for watching the video. Leave a comment. We want to know what you thought about it. And support us. Hit the like, subscribe, and check out our podcast. We're trying to empower the body to do the Lord's work better. See you in the next one.